Vishnupad Paramhamsa Privajakacarya Stotra Sat Abhaya Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya, BVT Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramhamsa Privajakacarya Stotra Sat Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्रीला हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमनंदी हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for coming to the class and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, The Lord in the Heart, Text 29 and 30. This 29 has a very small purport. Grahanena Gandham Rasanena Vaye Rasam. Grahanena Gandham Rasanena Vaye Rasam. Rupam Cha Drashtya Swasanam Tvacheva. Rupam cha drishtya swasanam tvacheva. Shrotrena chopetya nabho gunatvam. Shrotrena chopetya nabho gunatvam. Pranena Chakutim Upeti Yogi. Pranena Chakutim Upeti Yogi. Granena Gandham Rasanena Vairasam. Rupam Cha Drishtya Swasanam Tvacheva. Shrotrena chopetya nabho gunatvam. Pranena chakutim upeti yogi. Granena gandham rasanena vairasam. Rupam cha drishtya swasanam tvacheva. Shrotrena chopetya nabho gunatvam. Pranena chakutim upeti yogi. Please chant. Granena gandham rasanena vairasam. Rupam cha drishtya swasanam tvacheva. च दृष्ट्वा रसनोत्तचेरा प्राणेन चाकुतिमुपेति योगी ग्रामेण गन्धं रसनेन वैरसं रूपं च दृष्ट्वा स्वसनं ग्राणेन गन्धं रसनेन वैरसम् Mataji, please. Word to word, please repeat. Granena, by smelling. Gandham, aroma. Rasanena, by taste. Why exactly? Rasam, palate. Rupam, forms. Cha, also. Drishtya, by vision. Swasanam, contact. Tvacha, touch. Eva, as it were. Shrotrena, by vibration of the ear. Cha, also. Upetya, by achieving. Nabhagunatvam, identification of ether. Pranena, by sense organs. Cha, also. Akutim, material activities. Upeti, attains. Yogi, the devotee. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. The devotee thus surpasses the subtle objects of different senses like aroma by smelling, the palate by tasting, vision by seeing forms, touch by contacting, the vibrations of the ear by ethereal identification, and the sense organs by material activities. Purport. Beyond the sky there are subtle coverings, resembling the elementary coverings of the universe. The gross coverings are a development of partial ingredients of the subtle causes. So the yogi or devotee, along with liquidation of the gross elements, relinquishes the subtle causes like aroma by smelling. The pure spiritual spark, the living entity, thus becomes completely cleansed of all material contamination to become eligible for entrance into the kingdom of God. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation once again: the devotee thus surpasses the subtle objects of different senses like aroma by smelling, the palate by tasting, vision by seeing forms, touch by contacting, the vibrations of the ear by ethereal identification, and the sense organs by material activities. So here we are reading the sequence of how a yogi they merge themselves back, the material elements into the matter and the subtle elements into subtle forms, and gradually in the next verse we will hear how they get to egoism, and then the egoism to Mahatattva, and then to self-realization. So this is more a yogic way of self-realization, and then in the purport we will hear to the next verse we'll hear more how Srila Prabhupada he explains how the devotees they become self-realized by following the devotional practices. So I will just try to cover a little bit on this idea, because in the previous verses we have been discussing this, like how in the last verse we discussed after reaching Satyaloka, the devotee is specifically able to be incorporated fearlessly by the subtle body in an identity similar to that of the gross body, and one after another he gradually attains stages of existence from earthly to watery, fiery, glowing, and airy until he reaches the ethereal stage. So, this is like going from gross to subtle, from gross material senses, then to uh, subtle senses, intelligence, mind, and false ego. So the sequence, how it starts, how we come from spiritual world to material world, uh, it's explained in third canto, and there it's explained how everything starts from the Mahatattva, and then how from sound comes sky, and from um, the air, then the air comes, and then the water, and that's how we the different senses and the material bodies are created from the Mahatattva, and we know Mahatattva is part of um, the different Vishnu avatars, the three incarnations, Garbhodakshai, Shirodakshai, like that. So in these verses we are seeing the sequence how the practitioners here in this verse specifically, how the yogi, and it's interesting how Srila Prabhupada he translates the yogi as the devotee, and in the next purport he explains how the devotees become self-realized. So in this verse it says it gives the different process how the different senses like aroma by smelling, palate by tasting, vision by seeing forms, touch by contacting, vibrations of the ear by ethereal identification, and sense organs by material activities. So we can see on a material level our senses they only generally engaging with material objects, and that's what leads to more identification with the body, with the material body, and the false ego, it develops more and more. A person, they wants to attain more and more material assets, and it just keeps expanding like that. But the yogis, when through their practices, they are trying to become detached from all these things, and they are trying to come back to spiritual consciousness, trying to realize the self, aham brahmasmi. So the point is to understand the body is different from the spirit, but then the that's not sufficient, just knowing that I'm spirit soul. Just like when we are in material consciousness, we engage in material activities. So similarly, the spirit soul, it should have spiritual activities, and that's what brings the subject of all these different practices here in this verse about the yogis. But this is more like a bit difficult for most people to do. In now Bhagavatam, sorry, it was compiled just at before the start of Kali Yuga for people who will be coming to this world, and considering the future of living entities in Kali Yuga, how unqualified and how the strengths of the people will be diminished so much. So Srila Vyasadeva, he compiled this text, considering how people in future they will be able to become self-realized. And it's in Srimad Bhagavatam, the more the devotional practices are recommended in opposite to the yogic practices, because before this, most people, the Vedic culture was so prevalent, most people would be easily able to get into these kind of meditations. They knew these processes and they had those kind of strengths, abilities. They could live a very austere lifestyle. But these days, people are not generally, most people, they want a very comfortable life. They don't want to go through difficult, austere processes. Everyone wants things easy, and not only easy, like people want things instantly. The patience is so less that everything should happen just like as soon as it comes to mind, it should manifest. Like people say, if you put an intention and things will manifest, the universe will manifest it for you. Of course. So, but how it's gonna manifest? What's the process? What's the procedure? What's the system? Do we understand that? So that's what's being described here, and how the yogis, they are able to merge all these different aspects into the elements where they are supposed to go back, and then um, so the material senses, they go back to the material elements. Then from the subtle senses, so mind, in the purport to text 30 is explained how mind is in goodness. Okay, so I'll read the translation and parts of purports as we go through it. Um, the devotee, thus surpassing the gross and subtle forms of coverings, enters the plane of egoism, and in that status he merges the material modes of nature, ignorance and passion, in this point of neutralization, thus reaches egoism in goodness. After this, all egoism is merged in the Mahat Tattva, and he comes to the point of pure self realization. So, this is how it's described here. And the purport: pure self realization, as we have several times discussed, is the pure consciousness of admitting oneself to be the eternal servitor of the Lord. Thus one is reinstated in his original position of transcendental loving service to the Lord, as will be clearly explained in the following verses. This stage of rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord without any hopes of emolument from the Lord or any other way can be attained when the material senses are purified. An original pure state of the senses is revived. It is suggested herein that the process of purifying the senses is by the yogic way, namely the gross senses are merged in the mode of ignorance, and the subtle senses are merged in the mode of passion. The mind belongs to the mode of goodness and therefore is called Deva Maya or godly. Perfect purification of the mind is made possible when one is fixed in the conviction of being the eternal servitor of the Lord. Therefore, simple attainment of goodness is also a material mode. One has to surpass this stage of material goodness and reach the point of purified goodness or Vasudev Sattva. This Vasudev Sattva helps one to enter into the kingdom of God. So the mind is in the mode of goodness, but materially it's not always so. So the yogis, by all these practices, they bring their mind to mode of goodness. But like Srila Prabhupada is explaining in the purport, just being in mode of goodness is not enough. One has to transcend to spiritual goodness, Shuddha Sattva, Vasudev state. And how the yogis do is they merge their ego in the Mahat Tattva. Okay. We may also remember in this connection that the process of gradual emancipation by the devotees in the manner mentioned above, although authoritative, is not viable in the present age because of people's being primarily unaware of yoga practice. So this is comparing the yogic process with the devotional practice. The so-called yoga practice by the professional protagonists may be physiologically beneficial, but such small successes cannot help one in the attainment of spiritual emancipation as mentioned herein. 5,000 years ago, when the social status of human society was in perfect Vedic order, the yoga process mentioned herein was a common affair for everyone, because everyone, and especially the Brahmana and Kshatriya, was trained in the transcendental art under the care of the spiritual master, far away from home in the status of brahmacharya. Modern man, however, is incompetent to understand it perfectly. It's a long purport, so I'll try read it in parts. So coming back to this point, the egoism, due to the false ego, a person, their mind is absorbed in material activities. But once they come to mode of goodness lifestyle, the yogis by their yogic practices and the devotees by devotional practices, then they are able to merge the false ego into Mahat Tattva, and that's how the yogis become self-realized. But the devotees' devotional process is different, so that's what we will read now in the next part. It says, Lord Sri Chaitanya therefore made it easier for the prospective devotee of the present age in the following specific manner. Ultimately, there is no difference in the result. The first and foremost point is that one must understand the prime importance of Bhakti Yoga. The living beings in different species of life are undergoing different terms of engagement according to their fruitive actions and reactions. But in the execution of different activities, one who secures some resources in Bhakti Yoga can understand the importance of service to the Lord through the causeless mercy of the Lord, as well as that of the spiritual master. A sincere soul is helped by the Lord through meeting a bona fide spiritual master, the representative of the Lord. By the instruction of such a spiritual master, one gets the seed of Bhakti Yoga. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends that the devotee sow the seed of Bhakti Yoga in his heart and nurture it by the watering of hearing and chanting the holy name, fame, etc. of the Lord. The simple process of offenseless chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord will gradually promote one very soon to the stage of emancipation. There are three stages in chanting the holy name of the Lord. The first stage is the offensive chanting of the holy name, and the second is the reflective stage of chanting the holy name. The third stage is the offenseless chanting of the holy name of the Lord. In the second stage only, the stage of reflection, between the offensive and offenseless stages, one automatically attains the stage of emancipation. And in the offenseless stage, one actually enters into the kingdom of God. Although physically he may apparently be within the material world. To attain the offenseless stage, one must be on guard in the following manner, and then it explains uh, different aspects. So before reading those, I'll just mention a few points here. So materially, our mind is absorbed in material activities, and what happens? Intelligence is in the mode of passion. So intelligence is supposed to direct the mind to perform activities, but and the senses, they are sending messages to the mind. But when mind is materially absorbed and it's obstinate, we know from Bhagavad Gita how mind is obstinate and very difficult to overcome. So it doesn't take direction from the intelligence. Now the intelligence, if it's not spiritually nourished, then it will also direct the mind to material activities, material engagements. And so the yogis use these different processes of different kinds of meditation to purify their consciousness. Like in one of the previous texts, it said like one has to go through this planet where they have to pass through fire for purifying the remaining contaminations in their body. Um, yes, it's here. So, yes. So in the text 24, it says, "O king, when such a mystic passes over the Milky Way by the illuminating Shishumna to reach the highest planet Brahmaloka, he goes first to Vashvanar, the planet of the deity of fire, wherein he becomes completely cleansed of all contaminations. And thereafter he still goes higher to the circle of Shishumar to relate with Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead." So it's a process which is very different from the process we follow in bhakti practice, which Lord Chaitanya here uh, is in the purport. Srila Prabhupada explains how Lord Chaitanya introduced this process, and the practice is a simple practice. It seems like it's a simple practice of chanting the holy names of the Lord, hearing the pastimes, meditating on the forms of the Lord, and hearing about glorious activities of the Lord. And that's how the devotees, they purify their consciousness, or rather they engage their consciousness in service to the Supreme. And just by engaging in those activities, one naturally becomes purified. You don't have to go through all these fire and this and that. So that's the difference. But in the purport, like it is explained, even Sukadeva Goswami, he says that the result is the same. So what he means is that they both become self-realized, but the destination, it may not necessarily be the same, because Like there are different spiritual planets and there are different deities in those planets. So depending on a devotee's inclination, they get attracted to different deities and different planets, and they, based on their consciousness, they end up going different places and associate with the Lord on that planet. So one has to be very fortunate to receive this seed. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains the seed of bhakti. So I remember the words, Brahmanda Brahmite Kone Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Paya Bhakti Lata Bij. So living entity is wandering from different planets. Like in the previous verses we heard, these yogis, they go through all these different planetary systems to attain self-realization. So the living entity, they want it, but due to material desires we get stuck at different places, and therefore there has to be a proper procedure to get to achieve the goal. And it says in one of the purports in the Gita, unless the goal is fixed, the mind won't be pacified. So to pacify the mind, that's the process, the chanting of the holy names of the Lord, hearing the pastimes, and that's how we cultivate knowledge. Because in the beginning, proper understanding is also required. If we don't have the proper understanding, it's very easy to be bewildered by all these other things and to be distracted from the path, from the practice. So therefore, I'll read the next part. It says why it is important. It says, when we speak of hearing and chanting, it means that not only should one chant and hear the holy name of the Lord as Ram, Krishna, or systematically the 16 names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But one should also read and hear the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. The primary practice of Bhakti Yoga will cause the seed already sowed in heart to sprout, and by a regular watering process, as mentioned above, the Bhakti Yoga creeper will begin to grow. By systematic nurturing, the creeper will grow to such an extent that it will penetrate the coverings of the universe, as we have heard in previous verses. So I'll repeat this one more time. By systematic nurturing, the creeper will grow to such an extent that it will penetrate the coverings of the universe. As we have heard in previous verses, reach the effulgent sky, the Brahmajyoti, and go farther and farther, and reach the spiritual sky, where there are innumerable spiritual planets called Vaikuntha Lokas. Above all of them is Krishna Loka, or Goloka Vrindavan, wherein the growing creeper enters and takes repose at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. When one reaches the lotus feet of Lord Krishna at Goloka Vrindavan, the watering process of hearing and reading, as also chanting of the holy name in the pure devotional stage, fructifies, and the fruits grown there in the form of love of God are tangibly tasted by the devotee, even though he is here in this material world. So the devotee is still here, but he's already tasting the fruits. The ripe fruits of love of God are relished only by the devotees constantly engaged in the watering process as described above. But the working devotee must always be mindful so that the creeper which has so grown will not be cut off. Therefore, he should be mindful of the following considerations. Okay. So there are one might think there might be, Prabhupada might be talking about 9 offenses, but interestingly enough, here he's talking about 8 steps. And let's see what are those. So, first, offense by one at the feet of a pure devotee may be likened to the mad elephant who devastates a very good garden if it enters. One must be very careful to guard himself against such offenses at the feet of pure devotees, just as one protects a creeper by all around fencing. It so happens that by the watering process, some weeds are also grown, and unless such weeds are uprooted, the nurturing of the main creeper or the creeper of Bhakti Yoga may be hampered. Actually, these weeds are material enjoyment, merging of the self in the absolute without separate individuality, and many other desires in the field of religion, economic development, sense, enjoyment, and emancipation. There are many other weeds, like disobedience to the tenets of the revered scriptures, unnecessary engagements, killing animals, and hankering after material gain, prestige, and adoration. If sufficient care is not taken, then the watering process may only help to breed the weeds, stunting the healthy growth of the main creeper and resulting in no fructification of the ultimate requirement, love of God. The devotee must therefore be very careful to uproot the different weeds in the very beginning. Only then will the healthy growth of the main creeper not be stunted. And by so doing, the devotee is able to relish the fruit of love of God and thus live practically with Lord Krishna even in this life and be able to see the Lord in every step. The highest perfection of life is to enjoy life constantly in the association of the Lord, and one who can relish this does not aspire after any temporary enjoyment of the material world via other media. So, when the mind is engaged in service of the Lord, then even though many times the senses may force the mind because his mind is receiving the messages from the senses. So when we engage the senses in seeing beautiful forms of the Lord, Rukmini, Dwarkadish, Jagannath, Balle, Subhadra, Gauranitai, and serving the instructions of Prabhupada, spiritual masters, and like here it's explained in these steps, one has to, when we are nurturing the seed, we are watering the seed. So many times what happens, the weeds also grow side by side. And actually, people who know about gardening, they know the weeds, they grow much faster. And they can actually, they take all the energy, all the nutrients, and the actual plant, it doesn't grow so well. It becomes weak and gradually weeds take over. So therefore, here it's suggested, is recommended that especially for the practicing devotee, one has to be really very careful. One has to water the plant. At the same time, one has to see that we are keeping an eye on the weeds. And all these weeds are explained here. Essentially, it's material enjoyment through different ways. It could be through name, it could be through fame, it could be through material facilities. Like there is unlimited list, we can just keep going. But the point to understand is that essentially in our heart we desire, we want the association of the Lord. We want the association of pure saintly devotees, and we would be only able to appreciate it when we purify our consciousness. Because even though we may be in that association with, but if the consciousness is not right, we wouldn't appreciate it. And we can see that, like, these days, even when we present Krishna consciousness to people, there are people that are following so many different kinds of practices, and just the accepting higher authority is like so difficult for most people to take. They say, it doesn't have to be like this. You can find your own way. But if you find your own way, it's only based on your own level of intelligence and your own level of consciousness. How far can you go on your own? In one of the purports in Gita, I remember Srila Prabhupada gives the example of a swimmer. No matter how expert a swimmer is in the ocean, he can't beat the ocean. You're too weak to face the ocean. Uh, so, so we need all this good association. We need to hear the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. That'll nourish our intelligence, that'll purify our intelligence. And with that kind of strengthened intelligence, we'll have a strong conviction. And with that, we can carry on even though there are so many difficulties or so many impediments. Actually, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he sang a song. He says, all these impediments, they become like sources of pleasure because they help us get closer to Krishna. They help us make advancement. So when one progresses, they see the impediments as impetuses for advancement rather than problems in one's practice. We may not necessarily be there, but we know what's the goal. We can aspire, and we can work towards that direction. And especially by hearing all these pastimes, it gives us a hope, inspiration, and that's what makes the association lively. When you hear a very nice kirtan, you forget all your problems. You experience going beyond your mind, going beyond all the, you may be feeling sick, or you may be, whatever you are going through, you experience. Like, personally I can say, when I hear Nekatma Prabhu leading kirtan, just like, I don't worry about anything else. It's so, many other devotees, but like that, we have to find things that inspire us, that increase our enthusiasm, that help us become more absorbed. And of course, like all these steps, when we discuss with devotees, whoever we are taking guidance from or sharing, then we can work on these subtle aspects. Because in a public class, I was reading at the back of a book some quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He said, in public class you can deal with one's personal things. It's a general session and you give the philosophy, but every person, they have their different individual situation. So to deal with those things, we also need personal guides, and those are the people you share and discuss all these things with and work through these, because it takes work. And like the yogis, they follow all these difficult practices. It's difficult work, but they do it because they know what they want to achieve. So same way as devotees, we know the goal is love of Godhead, we want to experience it, and we know the procedure. So what is limiting us? That's what we have to think about. What is our limitation? What are the things we need to work with? And when we do that, then we will experience all these things. So I will conclude here with this point. But if someone like to do the discussion, we have a couple of minutes, I think, or some question. It's personally I've found it a little difficult to discuss about all these subtle nuances. In the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the more details are given. So if you are interested, you could look those parts also. Yeah. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. It was a lovely class.
Hare Krishna.
You mentioned Bhaktivinoda's poem about like asking for troubles because Which poem is that? Which? So you mentioned Bhakti Vinod's poem about like asking for troubles. I don't recall that. Do you remember the context? Which poem was that?
It's in one of the songs. I don't remember exactly, but it's very popular. So he's asking. I mentioned how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says the impediments he sees, he faces in his practice, they he see them as impetuses for advancement, for increasing his love for Krishna. So he's saying he don't recall it reading or hearing somewhere. Can you repeat? Is it clear or you want to repeat? Okay. So, anyone else? Yes, Prema bro.
What's your, you personally, how you deal with this deep desire? Then we want to enjoy material worlds, and it's very subtle. This false ego is very subtle, and what to speak about gross obstacles. So, um, what's your realization? How you deal with false ego? We can know a lot of philosophy, we can memorize Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, but still, what is this main ingredients for you? How to deal with it?
So his question is, how do you deal with the false ego? Because the internally we want to control, we want to enjoy, everything is there, and philosophically we know. But how do you personally do it in your practical life in devotional service?
I'm
Is that
personally
right?
ask you also how you deal. But,
Yes, I will share that. So, yeah, of course, many people actually don't even know the philosophy so well. Because if you just ask how many people have read the full writings of Srila Prabhupada or even Srimad Bhagavatam, there is not many hands. So, we also need to know the philosophy. Like in the next few verses, you will hear how even Lord Brahma, he heard the all the Vedic knowledge from Krishna himself, but still to set an example for people in general to follow, he studied the Vedas 3 times. It's in the probably this 31. Yes, it's in verse 34. So Sukdev Goswami is saying that Lord Brahma, he heard the Vedas from Lord Krishna himself, but still to set an example for people in general, he scrutinizingly studied the Vedas 3 times. So we need to study at least 3 times all the writings of Srila Prabhupada. And if you do that, actually, you will feel that you're becoming free from the false ego. But in general, what I do personally, because if one day, like I can give an example from own service of book distribution. One day you have a big day, many people take books, you get good donation, your mind is flying high, and then next day is different. It may not necessarily happen the same. So personally, what I notice is the days I go more with a humble mood, more prayerful mood, I remember it's by mercy of Guru and Krishna. I actually pray, please help me remain humble, because it's so easy to be puffed up. So when we have to practice to keep this humble mood, because this mind will kick in. Oh, you are the best guy here. You are running the show here, but it's not us. It's the Lord in the heart. He's giving you direction. The devotees, they are giving us inspiration, good association. When we appreciate all this that we have and we actually treasure it, then naturally the humility will kick in, and gradually we will, it's a gradual process. You've been practicing for so many years, I'm sure, but this time I don't want to hold the devotees for long. Um, yes, Savash Prabhu.
Thank you for a nice class.
Hare Krishna.
It's very interesting in the purport that Srila Prabhupada gives the definition of actually how to make advancement in the purport about how we should be hearing and chanting. So
Yes.
I heard a lecture by Prabhupada recently where he said that real hearing, the process of hearing, is there when one actually hears from a bona fide source, and after he hears from a bona fide source, then he speaks. And if one hears and then speaks, this is real hearing.
Yeah.
So in other words, we should be never running out of things to say if we come constantly hearing. And Prabhupada here in the purport states that hearing not only means chanting Hare Krishna,
Yes.
but hearing means hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and hearing the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
And if we hear those properly, then we'll speak.
Yes.
And when we speak, that's the hearing process.
Yes.
Because if you just read and you don't speak, you won't have a proper hearing.
Yes.
But if you read and you speak, and then you'll hear properly.
Yeah.
So that I thought that was an amazing formula.
Yes.
So I just thought because
Thank
Prabhupada
you.
mentioned that in the purport, on a couple
Yes.
of occasions, and he says also that is the watering for
Yeah.
the Lalita
The
beach.
process of watering.
Yes, it's that process. That's the watering
Yeah.
for that beach, that seed to come up of Krishna consciousness.
Yes. Yeah, this morning I was thinking about this point, how, like, especially yourself, many other disciples, I see many of you, you come so steadily every morning. I mean, you already know the philosophy, still, like, even the new devotees, we are speaking and you are listening to us. So it's like, it's amazing how I could think you already know the philosophy, why you are here to, but you understand more deeper aspects, and you understand the importance. So I see you every morning, you are here for Mangalarti, like that. So that's the change we see, because when we understand the process, then naturally you want to do it. Like when a person is hungry, naturally they want to go and eat. If you are not hungry, you won't eat. So it reminds me, we have to be hungry to develop our love for Krishna. And like Savash Prabhu said, this is the process here. So we know it. Now, how much are we going to do it? That's what we have to ask ourselves. Yes, Prabhu. Oh, yeah.
You spoke on the reflective and unoffensive list stages of chanting. Can you speak on the offensive stage?
Okay. So when we start, we take to chanting. Usually we make many mistakes, I could say, or offenses. Means is like a most common offense is being unattentive to chanting. So like Savash Prabhu was explaining now, how it's very simple. How it is simple is we just have to chant the mantra and we have to hear. There is no need of thinking or this or that. Nothing else is needed. We just speak the mantra and we hear the mantra. And then like how here in this purport is explained, we also hear the philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, which is the spoken word of Krishna, the Lord, and Srimad Bhagavatam, which is about his pastimes. But Srimad Bhagavatam is also originally spoken by Krishna himself. He spoke it to Brahma in just 4 texts. So Brahma could understand the whole Bhagavatam in 4 texts. But for us, Vyasadeva compiled 18,000 just for our gradual understanding, because we can't understand the whole Bhagavatam in those 4 texts. So therefore, to satisfy our mind, our intelligence, this to help us become self-realized by hearing these beautiful pastimes. Um, but yeah, the most common offense is being inattentive. Once we start to become attentive, then you will notice all other uh, shortcomings or areas of improvement. And once you start doing that, then you will see gradually you'll progress. But I wanted to, since you asked, I wanted to mention this point, like it's explained here. So the first stage is offensive chanting of the holy name, and second stage is the reflective stage of chanting the holy name. So it says in the second stage only, the stage of reflection, one automatically attains the stage of emancipation. So once we get to this second stage, which is the reflective stage, essentially what it means is once you start to become attentive, the more attentive you become, you will see all these different areas that we need to work on. And once you start to see those, they say seeing the enemy is a good start. Once you see the enemy, then you know what to do now. So even in the and even in offensive stage you will experience taste, and that's how gradually you will progress. So the main point I would say personally is be attentive. And once we be attentive, then rest of the things will be easy to deal with, because that's where everything starts from, in attention. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Glory to Srila Prabhupada.